Hello and welcome back to another episode from Driving Britain. Today we're going to be looking at misconceptions about the UK.
By the way, just going back to the theme of this is 100%, maybe the biggest misconception for Americans about the UK.
Now, I'm sure that a lot of you have seen different videos running around the internet of people trying to explain different things that they see in the UK and that they don't understand, and then they try to give their take on what they think they're seeing. Or people trying to dispel myths or ideas about the UK. But the problem is, almost every single one that I've seen about these have been people from outside of the UK trying to explain about, English and British things. I'm sure you can see the obvious problem there. You've got to assume that they're actually understanding these things themselves. And, most of the time, from what I can see, they're just not. They just don't get what it is that they're saying or why we're doing different things and that sort of stuff. So today you're going to have an actual British person and an English person explaining about Britain. Now, the first thing that I want to clear up before we get into the video, they're probably going to cover it, but before we even get there, I know that one of the big things that's going around is, I didn't know there's so many names for the UK or Britain or England or however you want to call it. Now, yeah, there are a lot of different names, but that's because they were updated as kind of, the monarchy and what comes within the UK was taken on board. So as England has expanded over its time, incorporating Scotland and Wales, then it extends through to, from Britain through to Great Britain, and then the UK with Ireland, and we've also got the Channel Islands and that sort of stuff. So, yeah, there are all these different names, but they're not ones that we actually use. They exist because other names existed before. Everybody in the UK, or at least most people, or anybody that I've ever spoken to, they just call it either the UK or they name the actual country part that they're from. So, England or Scotland, or I'm Welsh, or I'm Irish. They won't break it down any more than that. They won't say, I'm from Great Britain or I'm from the United Kingdom, and say it with the thought of that they're being kind of, technically correct with what they're saying. They're just going to say where they're from. If we're abroad and somebody asks where you're from, then you'll probably say, I'm from the UK, or I'm from Britain, or I'm from England or Scotland, and so on. All these different names that exist for the UK, they're just things that's been created and updated during history as the country's kind of grown, I guess you could say. I don't mean when we kind of visited all the other countries around most of the countries around the earth on our, let's say, extended gap year that got a bit out of hand. I don't mean from that, I just mean from stuff that's within the British Isles. Nobody in the UK is going to care what you call it, because it's not going to make a difference, because we don't think of it as an actual issue. It's just becoming an issue because it's been mentioned on the internet. But like I say, it's just names that's been attributed through history. It's not something that we currently think about or really care about. If you're Scottish and somebody asks where you're from, then you're going to be quite specific and you're going to say, I'm from Scotland. Same for Ireland and Wales. England, people don't really care as much as you say, I'm from Britain or I'm from the UK. Most people won't specifically say England because we kind of think ourselves as part of the UK. I know there is a big identity for England and people are proud to be from England, but at the same time, we don't make it as like a big discrimination thing. It's not like we don't want to be included with Scotland or Wales or Northern Ireland, because they're all great places as well. Right, that's enough about that. Let's get straight into the video and see what they've got to say.
What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical average American here today to react and learn about
The video we're watching is one of Tyler Rumpel's, if you don't already recognise it. If you haven't subscribed to him already, then I suggest you go and do that right after you've subscribed to ours.
Misconceptions about the UK. Americans have a lot of misconceptions about the UK, I think. A lot. I think it's because most of what Americans know and learn about the UK growing up and into adult life, it's just based on movies, TV shows, random news stuff that we don't really pay a lot of attention to, just random little snippets and tidbits from when we were like kids. And then we grow up and we tend to not focus a lot on stuff outside of America, so this one really hits close to home for me. I don't know exactly.
Yeah, like I say though, when they do try to look up what kind of constitutes different things about the UK, then they look to the internet, because that's where everybody looks for information. We come to YouTube like you are right now, except when all the videos been up, or most of the videos being uploaded to YouTube aren't really correct because they're being made from other people's interpretation about other countries. It's like me going to the US and then trying to explain about US culture. I'm not really going to understand US culture, even if I've been there for a few years. It just doesn't work like that. And that's not to say that people living in the UK don't understand the UK, because many people do, and a lot of the obvious things you take on board straight away. But there's just a lot of things that people seem to miss.
What we're going to talk about here with misconceptions, but it should be rather fascinating. I don't know if it's misconceptions with how people in the UK speak, or how things are run, or different stereotypes Americans have of the UK. And either way, this sounds very interesting to me, and should, at the very least, teach me a lot of things that perhaps me myself don't understand. Misconceptions I probably have. So, with that being said, let's take a look.
The most common misconception I seem to get is the metric versus imperial. I've mentioned this as a frustration of mine, is that you guys don't seem...
This is a perfect example of what I've just been saying. The person explaining on his video is an Australian. Now, okay, Australia and the UK are quite well connected, and we've obviously got quite a big history. And she might have been in the UK for many years and just held her accent, but it does kind of emphasise exactly what I was saying, ironically.
To commit to a single, like, you kind of mix and match, which is interesting because my...
Oh my gosh, this is a good one.
Use both.
Just for the record, I think metric is great. If you take a single science course, any sort of serious science class in America, in college or high school advanced course, you learn the metric. That's the first time you learn the metric system in America, and our minds are immediately blown and opened up to this amazing, incredible thing that we grow up with the imperial system, and we learn about the metric system like way.
Yeah, a lot of people in the UK have grown up with both, because we use imperial for, well, petrol now we still think of in terms of gallons. Maybe not quite so much the younger generation, I guess, because when we buy petrol now, it's listed in litres, but that's just because they want to put price increments on litres rather than gallons, because it shows a smaller kind of increase. If they put 10p on a litre and you've got 4.5 litres to a gallon, you don't notice that. Well, you're not going to notice the 10p quite as much as if they put 45, 50p on a gallon, which is going to stand out, and that's the reason why petrol switched to it. But when we buy milk, we buy a pint of milk. It is measured in millilitres as well. It's got it on the side, but we buy a pint of milk. So we use both. And also when we weigh ourselves in stones, pounds and stones. I think there's 14 pounds to a stone. You know, if you ask somebody how many pounds there are, how many pounds they weigh, they're not going to know. They'll tell you how many stones and pounds, and they might be able to mathematically work it out, but you wouldn't readily just think about it in just pounds like America. We have pounds and stones. Miles per hour for the speed of a car. Whereas if we measure something, we're likely to use metric, millimetres and metres.
Way late in life, and we're like, this is amazing. This is fantastic. Do other people know about this? This is just... So that's a whole thing. But what would be confusing to me is if the UK uses a combination of the metric and imperial system.
Yeah, we do, yeah.
Certain units of measure from each would be actually very confusing to me. So is that correct?
My mum's the same way. My mum...
That's the thing, that I know that a lot of the stuff with the UK where we're using a bit of both on a lot of different things, not just the metric and stuff, it confuses people from outside the UK, because they're thinking, why are you trying to use both systems? Surely that's just twice as complicated. But it's not, because we use the best of each system. So some things work out a little bit more convenient in metric, whereas other things work out more convenient in imperial. So we just learn both, because not because we're trying to be extra complicated, but just because we take the best of what there is there.
Measures things in stone, which is, I've never learnt stone.
Stone?
For this video I did homework, I researched it. So I finally learnt how many pounds are in a stone and all that jazz. So
I've heard of stones. It's a very, it's a really cool sounding measurement, if that makes sense. Like, it sounds really tough and cool, like.
Yeah, it also makes you sound extra heavy, doesn't it? It's like a bag of stones. So you weigh 14 bags of stones.
I measure things in stones, but at the same time, it sounds kind of archaic and barbaric, and I don't understand it. I don't know why pounds is any better, but stones has almost been funny to me. And I never quite understood it.
Can't say these videos aren't good for anything, for those wondering. It's 14 pounds is in a stone, I think. Using miles and kilometers. So if you're talking to someone, I'll be like, oh, they'll try and tell me it's X amount of kilometers. And I'm like, oh, but they use miles here. So, or like I'll say how many kilometers something is, and then they'll say, what do you mean? I don't know what you're talking about. So I've had to kind of learn miles. And to be honest, I don't really know them that much because it's not an easy conversion. It's like point something.
One of the easiest ways to think about, and one of the things that seems to come up quite often, is when you see 5k fun runs. If you just think of that as being about 3 miles, then you can kind of, picture it a little bit easier in your mind, I guess.
Totally fine, because we have no idea what... we cannot picture a kilometer in my mind, in general.
So I just halve it, basically, which I know is not right, but I'm like, I think I'm under rather than over.
Yeah, I think it's about 1.6.
So if it's 40 miles, I treat it as if it's 80. Which I don't think right. I think it's more like 60. Who knows?
Okay. Good enough for me.
I just drive so that my speed on the car matches the sign as I'm driving. But so many misconceptions that people think the UK is metric because Europe is metric, but it is not.
Okay, I was thinking like...
Yeah, but if you're driving in the UK, then you're going to have miles per hour on the dashboard on your speedo anyway. You're not going to have kilometres. So even if you don't know the conversion, if you see that the speed limit's 40 mile an hour, look at your dial, and when it says 40, that's what you're doing.
Like, what's the misconception here, actually? Okay, it's that thinking the UK is completely metric. I definitely did think that, so I'm counting this one. This is a...
if you want to fix your own car or something like that, and you've not got a brand new car, you've got an older sort of car, just imperial. If you've got a newer car, you're going to have just metric. So if you want to fix something that's older, then you need imperial spanners and sockets. If you want to fix something that's newer, then you need metric. So if you're a bit of a DIY type person, then you're going to need both sets. Same with Allen keys and all the rest of it.
The misconception that I personally held. I would have thought the UK was entirely metric, like Europe, right? Kind of funny to mix and match a little bit, but who am I to talk? We're out here counting stuff in inches and feet and yards and who knows what.
Fathoms.
The UK is higgledy-piggledy. Gotta learn both, which is good, I always think. So more education. A lot of people think the Queen is has ultimate power. That isn't the case. She's almost... I don't want to say she's a figurehead because she does have some power, so she can veto anything out of government. She can dismiss the entire parliament. I think she can fire ministers.
I'm actually, this is one of the things I learned super early on when I started learning more about the UK from YouTube. For one thing, Americans definitely do not understand the role of the king or queen in UK. I think most Americans do, if they wonder what the purpose is, they kind of scoff at it because we're like, oh, royalty, that's so old. Well,
the royalty, obviously now it's a king rather than a queen, but the royals, the king, has the power to instantly declare war on another country without consulting anybody or anything. They have the power to do that. You take the Queen's history as a kind of a benchmark because I'm pretty sure that the king will do things pretty much the same. If the Queen wants something done, then she's going to just use the back channels. She's going to tell the right people in government, in power, to do what it is that she wants done. She's not going to publicly start getting out the whip and telling people what to do. If she wanted to, she could. If the king wanted to, he could. But that's not really how the royals work. They much prefer, and they enjoy the idea of being able to control the country from behind the scenes without having to get the public flack for making decisions that might not be publicly favourable or that the public just disagree with. So, say for example, if a politician or a prime minister wants to declare war on another country for its resources or something like that, that's obviously something that's going to go down very bad in the media, the people and everything. But say if the king wanted that to happen, he's not going to go up and sit on the BBC News and say, oh, we want to declare war on another country because we want to take their resources. I'm not saying that that's why we would declare war on another country, but just as an extreme example. But he's not going to sit on the BBC News and do that. What he would do is summon the Prime Minister, tell the Prime Minister that this is what they need to do, and then that's what would happen. Now, I'm not saying that that happens very often, and obviously nothing quite so big, but that's how the royal family would work if they wanted something done. They don't show themselves as in any way being involved in politics. And that's how they manage to stay neutral with public opinion across the board. If they're on the news expressing political opinion and making political actions, then that's going to start to influence one group or another on how they view the royals. Whereas if they always do stuff from behind the scenes, then they escape all of that. That's why it appears that the royal family don't really do anything politically in the country. But what they do quite overtly for the country is they're a very big tourist attraction. They bring in many millions of pounds per year through people coming to see the royals and everything associated with the royals. It's also one of the most distinguishing factors of the United Kingdom, the British royal family.
Old and just makes no sense. So that's definitely a thing. But a lot of Americans in particular do think that royalty in the UK has a lot more power than they actually do. From what I understand, royalty is really more of a tradition, representative of the UK.
Yeah, that's exactly the point I was trying to make there. The royals do appear just to be a figurehead, a tourist attraction, and they do bring in absolutely millions into the country as a tourist attraction. But the reason why they manage to stay so neutral is because they don't stand on the BBC News and say, I want this to happen, or we as a country should be doing this, that or the other. They just don't do that. And not because they don't have those views, and not because we don't follow what it is that they do or don't want us to do. The beauty of them controlling the country this way means that they never sit in public opinion for having a political view one way or the other. It's the politicians, the Prime Minister and so on that always catch the public flack for whatever decision they make. It doesn't matter whether it's a good or bad decision, there'll always be the opposite side, one group or another that's feeling alienated by the decision or doesn't agree with it. If you're the person who's putting out that decision or showing that opinion, then that's when you're subject to the public kind of backlash from it. The royals don't want that. And we don't really want the royals to do that either, because we want them to be able to control whatever they feel like they need to control, or influence whatever they feel like they need to control, but without showing public opinion, because as soon as they start to show public opinion, then that makes them viewed in no different sort of way to how we would view the politicians and the Prime Minister. And that would also be the same from outside of the UK. So keeping them as this very glorified tourist attraction, the wield power behind the scenes, is beneficial to everybody. I'm not saying that the royals are influencing political decisions left, right and centre, because by and large they probably don't get involved at all because there's no need for them to. But if there's something that they really want done, then it's going to happen. They are, after all, the royals, the royal family for the United Kingdom. If they want something to happen, then it's going to happen, whether a politician or Prime Minister wants it to or not.
And even though they do technically have the power to do certain things legally, they mostly choose not to. From what I understand, that's kind of like out of date, and even if that stuff exists, it doesn't happen.
She can go to war, she can do all these things, but she won't, because it'd be so much civil unrest, so it's kind of like, technically she has...
Well, it's not about civil unrest, it's about if you're the figurehead that declares something that turns out to be controversial, then you're going to get the negative backlash from it. So why would you take all the flack for that when you can leave it to the politicians? But like I say, if the royal family wants something to happen throughout the UK or overseas interests, then that's going to happen. It's just that they're not going to go on the BBC News and say, yeah, I'm the one that caused it to happen, or I'm the one that initiated this.
Power, but realistically she won't exercise any of them because it'll upset the public, and then you a revolution on your hands. So, so the Queen, I would argue, pretty much predominantly, her biggest impact would be for tourism. Obviously she has power and she does other things, but the amount of tourism dollars that come, because if you're not from the UK, or even if you're from somewhere other than London, you'll probably come to London because you want to see the Crown Jewels, Buckingham Palace, all that kind of stuff. So, and that's the Queen. And then I think if you...
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, huh? Yeah, I mean, royalty in the UK has like a very important purpose in that sense to, yes, they are representatives of the entire nation and they attract a lot of tourism, which is like.
People have often debated the amount that the royal family cost the UK. The amount that they generate through income as a tourist attraction far, far outweighs anything that the royal family costs. And yeah, it is an extra expense for the country because we're paying out for two on where we're having to pay out for government and the royal family. But what we pay out for the two combined is still no different in relative comparison to what the US or any other country pays. In fact, I think it's quite a lot less than pound for pound. I don't mean money pound for pound. I mean size for size. What the US pays out for its government, the whole package, compared to what the UK pays out for government and the royals. The UK's version is still a lot cheaper.
Could call it silly, but important to the economy and like representing the culture. So it is actually pretty important. I've also heard Americans like embarrassingly say like, "Oh, have you met the king?" Like, "Oh, you're from Britain. Have you met the king?
That happens
have
a
you
lot.
spoken with him?" Like that's a normal, common thing. Like it's even.
That'd be like saying, have you spoken to your president? Have you had dinner with your president? He looks really, really friendly, or he looks annoying. What's he like as a dinner guest? We're not going to know. We don't get to actually speak to them or anything like that any more than what any other country does with their royals or their main head of state.
Even I know that sounds crazy.
Extend to the other royals, like they obviously have their duty. I think they do something with the military, but realistically, they're not going to put a royal in the line of fire. That's too much.
Actually, I don't know. The Queen, she was part of MT section. She was in the army when she was younger. She was a military mechanic. All of the royals have done military service. The younger royals have done military service in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other conflict zones. Now, I know they're not going to get into the worst of the situations in those different areas of theatre. All of the key royals have done their time in the military. They can't represent the country if they don't represent all parts of the country. And the military is a very big part of that country. The Queen had a very strong military background and a very strong belief in the military.
Power in the enemy's hands. But they do a lot of charity work, which I do appreciate. So just raising awareness and then helping out at certain charities and supporting them in that way, which is always good, but not as much power as Disney movies make you think.
Yeah, I'm not going to go into it because it's such a big topic, but if you look at the royals, they actually have a lot more involvement in the UK and abroad. And, especially with things like the military and stuff like that, compared to what she's saying. But it's such a big topic, it's kind of not for now. But if you really are interested, you want to see just how much they are involved, then it won't take much time for you to come up with quite a lot of stuff on Google.
That's where the medium is.
I think this misconception is totally accurate. Like, I think a lot of Americans in particular think this. So this is a good one.
Another big one, and this is from Americans, is that Americans seem to think that the UK and Australia have zero guns. And the UK and Australia are pretty similar. So America...
Well, obviously, I'm going to let her continue on with this one. But before she does, I got to say, in my experience, my personal American experience, I've never really thought this. To be honest, I've never thought like, oh, the UK and Australia, they don't have any guns.
Yeah, I think that what they're both getting at is with the UK, it's quite widely known that British police, on average, don't carry weapons. So special response teams do carry guns, and people that are protecting, officers that are protecting key places or infrastructure, they are also armed. But the average kind of bobby on the beat, the police officer on the ground, the local copper walking around, they're not going to have a gun on them. They are probably going to have a taser or tear gas, but that's about it. And that's where the idea of the UK not having guns. But in Australia, I think that the police do carry guns.
I've never really thought about that or anything. The only thing it makes me think of is a lot of other countries look at America and is like, oh, America loves guns. We love our freedom to bear guns, to own guns. and to proudly show them. And that is true to a large extent. That's definitely true, but I wouldn't say the opposite is true, that we think everyone else in the world hates guns or doesn't have guns, or I don't even know the gun laws in the UK, to be honest, or anything about that. So I don't know. I don't know about this one.
I think the UK and Australia don't have any guns because of how outspoken we are about gun law and that, particularly Port.
Yeah, I think that it's an Australian thing about being outspoken about gun law, because in the UK we don't really care one way or the other.
Arthur in Australia.
Okay.
That's not entirely true. We do have guns in both countries. However, in the UK, you can't get semi-automatic, same with Australia. But in terms of like, there are a lot of farmers in both countries, and farmers need guns to do their job.
Yeah.
So they can get it, obviously.
Okay, I mean, she could be totally correct. Like, there could be a lot of outspoken anti-gun things going on, or maybe...
No, in the UK there's not. There might be a couple of fringe groups, or after a particular incident occurs or something, then there might be the odd group or something, but generally speaking in the UK people don't even think about it. But there are quite a lot of gun owners in the UK, not just farmers. You can own personal weapons. You have to have a licence where you can get up to, I think, 6 weapons on your licence. You can't use them in public or carry them around in public, but you can use them in firing ranges. You can either keep them at the ranges or you can keep them at home. There's a couple of restrictions about how you keep them at home, things like that. But other than the factor of the weapon being you can't have a fully automatic rifle, that's pretty much a given in a lot of countries, I think. But other than that, there's not really any restrictions. Handguns, you can still have handguns, but they have to have an extending bar running down around the handle, around the grip. I think it's about 8 inches long, I think the bar on the grip, but it's just to make it so that a handgun can't be easily concealed. Ammo, I don't think there's a limit to how much ammo you can have, as long as it's stored separately to your rifles. So you have a gun safe and you have an ammo safe. If you shoot things like black powder weapons, then I don't think there's even any restrictions over buying black powder. I don't think you even need a license for buying the black powder. Is it Pyrodex, is it? The smokeless black powder? But either way.
Maybe news about this that went way over my head. That is fine. Good for me to learn about, I guess.
So the farmers do need them to do their jobs effectively, for whatever reason. I'm not a farmer, but I do know they need them. But you can't, I think, I don't know if this was in a film or if it was fact, but I think there was something about you have to wait 7 days before you can have your gun. That's like, so if you buy a gun, if you're angry because you found something out and you're like, oh, I can kill someone, and you go buy a gun, that you have to wait.
With the gun licence, whether you're a farmer or you want it for just personal use, then you have to apply for your firearms licence, and that can take months to get processed because it has to go off to the firearms department with the police and be reviewed there. When they come out, they check you out. You have to submit references and things like that to be able to get hold of a gun licence. It's a lot more difficult than what it is in the US. But for actually purchasing a gun, if you've already got a licence and you want to get a new one, then you can just purchase it right there and then. There's not really much restrictions on it as far as that goes. It's actually getting a firearms licence that takes the time.
7 days to calm down. And then maybe in 7 days you might not want to kill them. Maybe you still want to kill them. But at least there's that step in the process.
Okay.
And then there's also...
I mean, it's probably better that way. I've always said getting a gun in America is frighteningly too easy. It's very easy. So that's probably too extreme in that direction.
No semi-automatic. I think there's I'm not a gun expert by any means, so do not hold me as such. However, I think there's a limit on how many bullets you can have, all that kind of stuff. And there's...
Yeah, I think that any limits with the ammo is just within reasonable use. I don't think there's a specific figure. It's just what's reasonable for the amount of weapons that you've got.
And you have to sit a course, and you have to have a license as well for all of them. So
yeah,
I don't know about a course. If you're part of a firearms club, then you'd be firearms certified. You know, they'll check that you're safe with a weapon, but it's not like you've got to go off and do some sort of test or anything.
It is still very possible to get a gun if you're a gun head. Go to town, but there are just some rules that make it a bit safer, and they basically translate to Australia as well. Okay. But I know a lot of Americans seem to think there are no guns at all. Generally, in
you know what? Maybe if I cared more about gun ownership, like personally, if I cared more about that, and I had wondered, oh, what's the law like and the opinion like overseas and stuff, maybe I would know more about this opinion that she's talking.
That pretty much sums up how the UK think of guns. Nobody really cares one way or the other. Yeah, there are guns in the UK, but it's not really that much of a big issue. Yeah, there's guns in other countries abroad, but that doesn't really affect us, so why would we care? So where she's saying that, there's big belief in the UK about, or the UK and Australia about anti-guns and stuff, that's just not right. Maybe in Australia, there might be big movements in Australia, but like I say, the situation with guns might be a bit different in Australia to what it is in the UK. But as far as people in the UK are concerned, we really don't care one way or the other.
Talking about this misconception?
London, like in a city, you'd have no guns, whereas in the countryside, that's where they are, because that's where the farmers are. But
okay.
The UK, London has all its knife crime. However, the knife crime seems to be, from my very limited experience, mostly gang on gang. So like if you're just a normal person going about your normal business, you probably won't get stabbed.
What? Wait, what? This took a turn. All the knife crime in London. Oh, don't worry. If you're not part of a gang, you probably won't get stabbed. Is she kind of...
What this comes down to is there's a lot of big reports coming out from the amount of knife crime in London. It started a couple of years ago, and there is quite a bit of knife crime generally throughout gangs, just the same as in any other country. But the thing is, in the UK, because there's not that many actual shootings, even though gangs can get hold of firearms, it's generally knife crime rather than gun crime. So it means that it gets reported on a bit more, and because that's the most extreme of most of the attacks, then it means that that's what gets highlighted more often than everything else. And so it kind of makes it look a little bit out of proportion. Living in London, in some bad parts of London, then maybe it's a bit worse. And the same for other parts of the UK. Maybe you can have some areas worse than others, but generally I don't think most people would give a second thought about knife crime. Maybe that's just something maybe she lives in a particularly bad area in the UK or something. Well, in London at least.
Kind of joking, like exaggerating. Maybe you do need a gun now. Like now I'm questioning everything. Okay.
Please do.
It is what it is.
No promises though. Who knows? I think this next misconception is one that I think a lot of you get annoyed about actually, is that people seem to think that the whole of the UK is only London. So when I travel, I know that, as I sound Australian, but to people who don't, to non-Brits, I actually sound British because I don't sound like Crocodile Dundee or Steve Irwin, so they assume I'm not Australian.
She does sound British to me. She's absolutely correct. I actually would have assumed that. That's very funny. It's actually very funny. I'm the perfect audience for this, I guess. Yes. Well, she's saying that a lot of people outside of the UK think that the UK is London, basically. True, but even more specific, in America, the vast, vast majority of Americans use the words UK, Britain, and England all interchangeably, as if they are literally the same thing.
So they think I'm British.
Yeah, but like I say, people in the UK, they're not going to care one way or the other what you call it, because most people in the UK all call it all of those different names as well, because they are interchangeable, mainly because people don't really know what the meanings are behind them. They just see them as the same thing, because unless you, like I said earlier, delve into the history of it, then people just generally see it as the same thing. On the side of cans of pop and things like that, when I was younger, you used to get little stickers saying keep Britain tidy. Now I think it says keep the UK tidy. But other than that very small difference, I don't think people would have even noticed a difference. As for people thinking that the whole of the UK is just London, well, most people from the UK, especially say England, because you're on about London, so if you think of England itself, unless you work in London or live in London, you wouldn't go to London if you were living in any other part of the UK. Not generally. You might go there as a one-off, but you wouldn't just go there, because London's almost like a separate entity of its own. Obviously there's a lot of tourists, which isn't a bad thing. We don't mind tourists in any part of the UK, but in London there's a very high concentration of tourists all in one very small area. But also London doesn't really represent what the UK is like. London demonstrates a little bit of the royalty, and London Bridge and Big Ben and things like that, some of the big icons, the London bus. But for actual England or the UK, the only way that you're going to see anything that's actually kind of British is by going outside of London, because London is constructed around tourism. So what you're going to see is things that's playing up to tourists rather than something that's actually English, British, Scottish, Welsh, Northern Ireland, any of that sort of stuff. The only way you're going to actually understand or see anything from those places is to physically go to them. But if you just go to London, then all you're going to see is tourist London. You're not going to see anything of England or the UK.
Even I had a skydiving instructor in Canada who lived on Australia, and he thought I was English. I was like, What are you talking about? Like, he lived with us, but he did live in Queensland, which is basically the Steve Irwin accent. Anyways, so anyway, when
she sounds British to me. Like, I gotta say, like, I don't blame him, her skydiving instructor.
Travel, people think I'm British, and they'll say, oh, are you from London? Not from England, not from the UK, not from anywhere. I would love to
Yeah, most people in the UK can't tell the difference between American and Canadian a lot of the time, because you sound quite similar to us.
Hear what a Scottish person's experience would be, particularly travelling somewhere that does just seem to think London and the received pronunciation accent's the only accent. So if you're Scottish or Northern, you know, I'm talking Liverpool, I'm talking Manchester, Newcastle, give me a Geordie accent.
That is funny. I guess if you're in her position, like, I feel like you have to have a British accent to experience this, because I'm just not around it as an American. I would never personally be like, are you from London? You sound like you're from London. I feel like I'd say...
Yeah, the kind of stereotypical English accent that you would get in a lot of movies, audiobooks, things like that, are what used to be called estuary English. So it's basically North London, hasn't really got, just not any sort of Cockney accent or anything like that. It's just Middle England. Not middle as in up as far as Birmingham, just kind of literally in between, I guess, Birmingham and London, somewhere in that middle centre, so that there's no real particular accent or twang. It's just quite clear English, estuary English.
Britain, probably. I try to like cast as big as net as possible. That's funny. I could absolutely see people doing that, though. Are you from London, specifically, as if that accent is tied to London? I get this one. This is probably true.
Tell me what Americans, where they think you're from, because I don't think they would guess that you were British first, from my experience. But I could be wrong. People seem to say, oh, I'm going to London, I'm not going to the UK or anything. So they just seem to think the whole kingdom is just London, which, if you're not in London, which most of you guys aren't, can be quite frustrating.
Yeah.
I even know I get so many comments on my earlier videos of people saying, get out of London, see the rest of the UK, and I'm like, do you know who I am? I also do travel stuff, so like I like to travel around. Of course I've been outside London.
That's very strange to me, why people do that. I think Americans are very guilty of this. Like, when people talk about America, they don't say, oh, are you from New York? Right? Unless I guess I don't know for sure. But that would just seem kind of silly. So I don't know why we say, oh, are you from London? Well,
London's the capital city, so yeah, it's the name, or one of the only city names, main city names, that people are going to generally know from outside of the UK, I guess. You might hear other names, you might know some other ones, but generally I think that you're just going to pop up with the main ones. If someone from the UK is asked to list any main states from the US, then we're going to pop up with the obvious ones like LA and New York. We're not going to come up with, things like Utah and stuff like that. We're just going to come up with the most popular ones, and so I think it's the same the other way around.
It's definitely kind of strange.
London just happens to be the workers, unfortunately. Next one will surprise no one, but people think it rains all the time. And depending where you are in the UK, it does rain a lot. However, it kind of conflicts with my previous point. So people think London's the only place, but then they think it rains all the time. It doesn't rain that much in the south, and definitely not in London just because of where we are geographically. But obviously Scotland, Newcastle, it does rain quite a bit more than down south.
Okay.
But according to the people who are saying that it rains all the time, they don't really count that as like the UK.
Well, our channel's called Driving Britain, and that's because we're primarily a driving channel. If you go to our channel, you'll see one of the playlists listed as driving tours. Now, they're driving tours from around the UK, from England, Wales, Scotland, some from Northern Ireland, all different parts. You'll notice that we film all year round, not just on sunny days or anything. And you'll notice that some days you'll see a little bit of drizzle, some days it's heavy rain, most days it's just fair weather. So if you go then you'll have a look, you'll notice that most of the videos are just pretty good weather, and that's from all parts of the UK. We've been filming in the Scottish Highlands, in the Outer Hebrides, the Inner Hebrides, as far south as we can get, all the way down to Colchester and Essex on the opposite corner, even down towards the other side, down towards Bristol and Weston-super-Mare. So you're all parts of the UK. And you'll notice that mostly the weather's all right. If you're in Ireland, you're going to get a bit more rain. Northern Scotland does get a bit more rain, can get a bit colder, things like that. But generally, most of the UK weather's pretty fair.
Hey, do you know what I mean? Like, it's...
I think I know what she means. Yeah, okay, so they're wrong on a technicality, but I have heard this one where, oh, it's always rainy in London, or you know, stuff like that. As an American, I've definitely heard that. I just never thought much about it, I guess. And according to her, in certain parts of the UK, this is true, just not necessarily London.
Yeah, it's generally not true overall, even in certain parts. I mean, some places like Ireland do get more rain because how they're geographically positioned. But even then, you know, there's not anywhere near as much rain as the stereotype would say. In mainland England and Scotland, there's really not that much more rain than in any other country. Obviously, if you go to the Sunshine State in the US or something, then it's called that for a reason. You're not going to see much rain. But you go to most of the places, you know, normal climate sort of countries around the earth, I don't think that England, Scotland, Wales or Ireland really has anything much different to those sort of places.
You can't have both. You've got to pick one. Obviously, I've said this in depth. I love the UK weather. I feel like it's not too extreme, it's not too cold, it's not too hot, it's just pleasant. Okay. You can always be comfortable. You're never like absolutely dying and you're never absolutely freezing, you know?
Okay.
When it gets to a certain heat...
In the UK, in the winter, we can go down to, in say central England as an example, because that's about in the middle of everywhere. You might get down to -7 the odd time during winter, but usually -2, -3 is usually about the lowest that it would generally get, and that'll only be for a month or so during the peak of winter. In the summer, then you're going to go up to 85 degrees at the most. Doesn't really go much, Celsius I'm talking about, doesn't go much above that.
Heat, you can only take off so many layers, and when it's so cold, like, you just have to like wear a balaclava because it's just the air hurts your skin, which was me in Finland in -20.
I think that's a big reason, like, I enjoy American weather as well. Very exactly how I would describe it. It's not too extreme in either direction, depending on where you live, of course. But in general,
I think the one difference between the US and the UK, though, you know, generally speaking, is in the UK we're likely to have dehumidifiers running to take the humidity out of the air, to take the moisture out of the air, whereas in the US a lot of places run humidifiers to try and put the moisture into the air. That's quite a big difference.
It's totally random.
So, the UK, always easy to feel comfortable. I recommend. I do have a question though. When I was in Australia, I had all of the weather apps because I like tracking it, which just makes me very British, I know. But I had an app from the Bureau of Metropolitan, the BOM, B-O-M, website, Bureau of Metropolitan. Oh my god, why can't I say that word? Anyways, and that had a radar, and it was really great because you could see like if rain was coming, how heavy it was going to be, and also wind direction.
Yep. I
haven't been able to find a good one for the UK for this. I just want a radar app or website even, because let's be honest.
I thought this was going to be like some super insightful, fascinating tangent. This question only maybe I could answer from my point of view. No, it's Can you recommend her an app, a weather app? That's good.
That's quite funny. Well, the one that we use when we're filming throughout the UK, just to make sure we're not going to get anything too extreme, we use Weather Radar because it gives all of those sort of things. But also the Met Office which is kind of like where most of the weather reports come from in the first place in the UK. The Met Office run their own website and their own graphs. And they've got their own app as well, I think.
The weather app lies, it tells me it's going to be fine, and then I go on a run and it's an absolute downpour. And I'm like, where did this come from, weather app? And then the BBC weather is not too bad. I just would love a radar. So please, if there's any other weather watchers out there, tell me what your weather app to go to is, because I really need one. The other stereotype that the Brits seem to get is that you all have bad teeth. You guys don't. I don't know where this started.
I gotta pause that immediately. This one in... oh boy. This is in a lot of memes in America. It's on TikTok. It's on social media. It's a running joke. I don't know how it started. It was in all the Austin Powers movies. He made it even more famous in America. This stereotype of people in Britain, the UK, having bad...
It's easy to explain, and not for the reasons that you would expect. It comes down to advertising. There was a story that went through the UK a few years ago, and part of the NHS, you can get funding towards dental care. So you kind of get money off, or you can get free dental care depending on your income, which I know sounds bizarre if you're living in the US, the idea of anything to do with healthcare being free, but in the UK, that's how it is. If you're on low income, then you're likely to get all of your healthcare, including your dental care, paid for. But now the government did change a little bit of the funding and the way that it was being attributed to different NHS dentists. And that spiralled off to a bit of a controversy, and then it got blew up in the media, and they made all sorts of different claims in the usual sort of way that media groups do to try and sell their newspapers or stories or whatever. And of course you've got the gimmick from the Austin Powers. But when those stories came out, the US media saw a very big opportunity. When that story came out, you had UK groups, media groups, trying to find people with the worst teeth possible, that 0.0001% of any population that have one tooth between a lot of them. And they purposely put them on camera to say, oh, look, these new government changes, look what it's done, which wasn't realistic. They spent hours trying to find these people, days or months or whatever it took them, and then picked the worst people possible, took the dentures away, stuck a bit of chewing gum in the mouth to represent a tooth, and then got them on camera trying to make out that the world was ending. Normal sort of stuff, media sort of stuff. But all the groups in the US that sell all of your dental products, and all of your dentists and all the main toothpaste groups, all the teeth whitening groups, they saw a very big opportunity. And they suddenly realised that what they could do is use it as a threat that was based on a lie, basically, but a threat to say, if you don't buy our product, if you don't get your teeth done right now, if you don't get your teeth extra whitened right now, then you're going to have teeth like this. And then they bring up this random person that the whole of the UK media have searched the country to try and find with the worst teeth in history. Looks like a burnt out graveyard fence or something like that. They're really bad teeth, and they've purposely picked them because of that. So all of the American groups quickly jumped onto this, highlighted this group of half a dozen people, and used it as a beating stick to scare Americans into buying more dental products and to getting their teeth done more, because it's a very, very big business in the US. You don't get NHS concessions. So it was basically media hype by the companies selling the products that would stop you from having these apparently horrific teeth. Now actually there was a study done by, I think it was Harvard University, only a year or so ago, and their data showed that teeth in the UK were on average more healthy than teeth in the US. Teeth in the US tend to be Tipex white, sparkling bright white, because they've been painted rather than because they naturally like it. Whereas in the UK, we don't feel quite as threatened by the different media groups and that sort of stuff saying, oh, buy this or you're going to be ugly. We don't buy into it as much. So it means that it's not as effective on us, so we're more likely to have just natural teeth with the natural whiteness. We're not going to buy as many products to make our teeth look fake white, unless we're having to go in front of a camera, and that's because it's expected. Whereas in America, the whole of the population, it's not just people on TV that's doing it, the whole population is doing it because it's being kind of drummed into you so much, and you're basically being groomed by the companies selling the products that get you to that stage with your sparkling Tipex bright white teeth. Tipex is that white paint eraser stuff that you put on ink writing to rewrite a word. If you write a word wrong and you put that white paint on in school or in college or whatever, the UK brand is called Tipp-Ex. I don't know about in other countries. Well, it looks like you put that on your teeth because it's so bright white, which isn't the natural look for teeth. But you're buying it because you've been conned into buying it, not because that's how teeth naturally look.
Teeth. I've always wondered where that came from. It's very...
Well, now you know.
Very funny, and I don't believe it's true. I don't know why that would be true. It's not. But it
means
is
the bad
funny.
teeth part, not that story.
Also, it's so silly because you guys have... I wonder if you guys were the first people to have universal healthcare. I don't know who the first was. But you guys obviously have universal healthcare. And like that covers dentistry compared to like the stereotype comes from America because they've all got like veneers and perfect teeth. And they obviously don't. So it should be the other way around. It should be the country without the healthcare system should be the one with bad teeth. But that's not the case.
Right.
Yeah, but like I say though, in America you are paying out money that you haven't got to get your teeth veneered or to get them whitened so that your teeth look like the newsreader teeth, because that's what you're told is normal and that's what you kind of bought into, groomed to believe, whereas that's not how teeth naturally look. Teeth naturally look like Tyler's teeth. They don't look like they're being whitened, they just look like they're naturally white, and that's the whiteness that you'd get on most British teeth. Whereas what you get in your newsreader, where it starts to hurt your eyes because it's glinting so brightly, that's not natural. That's not what teeth look like. You've just been sold a lie. And this story from British bad teeth with these one or two photos from the worst people that out of any population that were bought up, that's what was used as the beating stick to scare you into buying the products. In the UK, we're not, I don't want to make this sound bad, but we're just not that gullible. And a lot of people do it, and there's a lot of people buying these products, but generally the average population just going to have naturally white teeth rather than paying out for veneers and stuff like that.
But yeah, Brits don't have bad teeth. Got, I would say, perfect.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. I've heard this one. It's the weirdest to me. It's super weird. But first time I heard it, I was like, that's not true. Why would that be true? That's so random.
Average teeth in a good way, you know? I don't know why whenever I film, Bambi's like, now's my time to run around and make as much noise as possible. That tapping is her. She's not doing anything valuable. She's sniffing the ground. But she has been asleep for the last 5 hours. So yeah, average teeth in a good way. So when I think of like good teeth would be like those really big fake veneers and they look, you know, Love Island. We've all seen it. The people that go to Turkey and get like big fake teeth. I think that's like good bad teeth or bad good teeth, you know? And then there's obviously bad teeth. Everyone's teeth here are normal. So good work with that one. I'm so sorry that your reputation has bad teeth because I don't see it.
That's a good one. It's a good misconception.
I mentioned this in my previous video, but a common misconception about the UK is the breakdown, which is, I mentioned this in my things that annoy me about the UK video about people being so quick to call me out when I was just like making a simple error and not giving me the benefit of the doubt of knowing what the United Kingdom is versus Britain versus Great Britain, that kind of thing. So...
I mean, I don't blame... I mean, from my point of view...
Yeah, but the people calling her out are people that are watching these videos and thinking that it's a big deal, whereas if you ask most people in the UK, they're not even going to know what you're on about, let alone care.
That is the #1 misconception for Americans, so I sympathize.
The reason for that is because a lot of people don't, and I understand that. Particularly, I think even like Trump, of all people, like the president of the United States made a mistake by saying the wrong one. Yeah. And like if the president is making that error, like what good is the average person going to have?
Yeah, but maybe it's because he's been in contact more with speaking over the phone stuff, more with people in the UK, because like I say, in the UK, we wouldn't have even noticed it. The only people that are complaining about this are just people that want to complain about whatever they can find or whatever they can think of. But most people in the UK aren't even going to know the differences, let alone care.
You know what, I was going to say, if there's anyone watching from the US or outside the UK, I've actually met a lot of UK people that don't know the difference. So I'm going to run through it really quick.
Really? Wait.
To help you in case you don't.
Wait, there's people in the UK who don't know the difference. I mean...
The only people in the UK that are going to know the difference are either people that have studied history or politics, because that's when the changes were made over a period of time. Or if they're a person that have been watching these types of videos, so they've seen it come up as a topic and now they've learned something new and are quick to try and demonstrate that they've learnt something new, so they want to try and correct everybody else as quickly as they can. But generally speaking, nobody knows, nobody cares. You're either from the UK, from England, from Scotland, from Ireland, from Northern Ireland. Nobody cares. We call ourselves Driving Britain, but we film in Northern Ireland as well. Does that make us hypocrites? Does it make us incorrect? We're doing a reaction video. How does that fit into the scheme of things? Nobody cares.
Makes me feel a lot better.
I don't know. And to prove that I do know, Great Britain is made up of the...
I might as well make this a game for myself. Just to make sure I'm still sharp. Great Britain is Wales, England, and Scotland, right?
Countries. England, Scotland, and Wales. And Scotland and Wales both have their own government. So, you know, there's the, I think, is it the United Scotland Party?
Really?
There is a Scottish party. They have a lot of opinions. They won most of Scotland, actually.
Huh.
So they're both countries. They're not... And then England, its own country. So they're...
Scottish Parliament and the Welsh Assembly.
They're all different, but they're all under the same umbrella.
Right.
Then the United Kingdom...
United Kingdom, England, Scotland, Wales, and also includes Northern Ireland.
Which, by the way, kingdom is such a good word. It reminds me of, like, Disney.
I feel very smart. Very, very smart.
I love it so much. But yeah, so the United Kingdom is everything I just said, plus Ireland, because it's a different landmass. But then if you go... But then there's also the Channel Islands and the Islands of Man. I'm going to have to read off the list of the islands, because to be honest...
Okay, excuse me. There's even more to this. Just when I thought I was on top of everything, there's these extra little islands I vaguely have heard about. I didn't actually know they technically fit into any definition of the UK. Sorry.
Honest, I'm not an expert on this one. So it is Jersey, Guernsey, Alderney, Sark, Herm, and the Irish Sea, Isle of Man, and the Irish Sea. Those islands are not part of the UK, but they recognise the Queen as their leader. It's kind of like Australia, but a bit more removed.
Huh.
A bit less removed, because you're closer,
Really?
physically.
A bit less removed.
But then, if you go even further out, there's the British Isles, which is everything I've said. You've got England, Wales, Scotland, Ireland, Isle of Man, all of the islands I just said, Guernsey, Jersey, blah, Jersey, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, a British Isles. I've heard of that term. I've heard of this. Okay, that makes sense. That's just everything? Literally everything.
Republic of Ireland. So even though people often will, I know Irish people get quite annoyed when they say that Ireland's not part of the UK, like the Republic of Ireland, it is part of the British Isles. So
yeah, so everything. Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland are under that. And a bunch of random little...
And that's the exact reason why nobody in the UK would actually bother making any definition between it. You'd either say that you're from the UK, or if you wanted to be specific, you'd say, oh, I'm from Northern Ireland, or I'm from Scotland, or Wales, or so on. But otherwise, mainland UK type territory especially, you're just going to say I'm from the UK.
Islands that I don't know anything about.
So there you go. Quick, brief geography lesson with me. And I've learnt the names of the Channel Islands because I didn't know. So there you go.
By the way, just going back to the theme of this is 100%, maybe the biggest misconception for Americans about the UK is the naming, for sure.
So that was some of the common misconceptions my family and friends have, and people I work.
Yeah, but it's a misconception, not for the reason that Tyler thinks. He thinks it's a misconception because he thinks that nobody understands it and nobody outside the UK realises that there's all these different names and that they all mean different things. But no, the real misconception is that nobody in the UK differentiates any of the different areas. We just see it all as the UK or not. We might list down as the specific area that you're from, but generally we wouldn't even think about whether we're saying Britain or Great Britain or the UK or any of the other terms. We would just say whatever came to mind. We wouldn't be thinking about the political or geographic context of what we're saying. We're just saying one of the many names for the UK.
Work with or comments I get from Americans, so I thought I'd make a video clearing everything up. I hope you enjoyed it. My shout out of the week goes to Brian O'Keefe. Thank you so much for...
Oh, shout out of the week. That's kind of nice. Okay, I guess that's it. the top 10 misconceptions about the UK. Actually, and in her title, she said lies about the UK. These were lies, fibs. I liked this. I really did. This was by Yvette's Vibes. This was very good. I liked it. That was a well-crafted list and entertaining. And it had stuff that actually I didn't know. Which makes sense, because they're misconceptions.
Okay, there's one thing that they haven't mentioned, and that's the taps in the UK. Now, a lot of houses do still have two taps, a hot tap and a cold tap. And this confuses the whole of the world. But you think what you do when you go in your kitchen, say you've got some crocs that you want to wash up, or you want to wash your hands, you use your mixer tap, you put the tap on, and then you turn the dial, the lever, push it round to wherever you want until the water's at the temperature that you want for washing up and washing your hands. Sometimes you get it a bit wrong, you have to nudge it back a bit because it goes too hot, or you nudge it a bit more because it's not gone warm enough. You do all things like that, don't you? We don't, we just turn the tap on and it's already at the perfect temperature to what we want. Because you can alter the temperature of the water, it doesn't have, it's not independent, you set it to whatever temperature you want it. So you put it as hot as you want it for washing your hands on washing crocs or whatever else you use the hot water for, or however hot you want it in the shower. You just set the water temperature to that. Then every time you turn on a hot tap, it's always perfect, always at that exact temperature, every time. We don't have to adjust anything or do anything, it's just always there. And also when we use the cold water, it's always perfectly cold. We don't have remnants of hot water running through the pipe and then trying to get the cold through. So we don't have to waste water running the tap to get the cold through. Or the other way around, the first bit of the hot water is extra cold because it's been running through a cold pipe. So the hot and cold taps, it started because of boilers and bacteria in the boilers and things like that, so then you wouldn't want to drink the hot water. But we kept it because it's easy. Makes things much easier. You don't have to fiddle around trying to adjust the tap temperature. Now I know that there's ideas of people moving their hands between a hot tap and a cold tap trying to get a medium warmth and that sort of stuff, but that's not true because the hot tap you set it to the temperature that you already want. So the reason why we have two taps in most UK houses is because it's more convenient and it's perfect. You always get the temperature of the hot water at the exact temperature that you like and that you prefer without having to do anything. And the cold water is always freezing cold water straight out of the ground, so you can have a nice cold glass of water every single time. And UK water is safe to drink. You never have to think about it. So that's one of the things that they haven't mentioned, but they should have had pretty much at the top of their list.
And I'm American, and that's the whole point. Yeah, very, very good stuff. I really do enjoy learning about this stuff, like this stuff in particular, the stereotypes, the misconceptions, the thing. There's all these random little things that as an American I grew up believing or not knowing about the UK, one of the most influential, biggest places on the planet. So it's always very entertaining for me to learn more about it. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like or leave a comment.
Okay, I think he's pretty much at the end of his video. Now you see from quite a few bits that we've gone through, as we've gone through there's even somebody that's living in the UK, because they're from outside the UK, they're trying to make their own take on what they think's happening, and even then they're still getting half it wrong, which is why we thought we would make the video. But we've only covered a couple of things in this video, so all of the other things that you keep hearing and that you think about, add it to the comment section and we'll make up a list and we'll make a second video following it up. If there's anything else that you think that we've not included, then make sure you put it into the comment section anyway. And if you have enjoyed the video, don't forget to give a thumbs up and subscribe. Okay, thank you for watching and we'll see you next time.